What's good, Charles? Isaac Paul, and welcome to the script. Man, let's get right into it. So, for those of you all that are not aware of this, that track that you all heard in the intro, man, that was produced by yours truly. You know what I'm saying? I don't think I've ever openly taken credit for that. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, that was one of my crowning achievements. You know what I'm saying? It was a super dope song that, did a little movement on the underground, but it didn't do nearly what it was supposed to do. But the beat was dope. But nonetheless, you guys, man, I appreciate you all for tuning in. This is going to be, a fun show. It's going to be a little different, right? Because really what I want to do on this show is look back at one of our past episodes where we had a really, really good discussion. And, it just felt kind of relevant for a number of different reasons. But, I did want to just step in briefly because I thought it would be important to just on this platform show an immense amount of love and just credit and adoration to Joy Ann Reid. She recently, her show was canceled. And, it is a very unfortunate and sad thing to hear. I did want to have a bit of a discussion about it, not really get too in depth. It might be something that I want to do a deeper dive. Admittedly, while I'm a big fan of hers, I had not been tapped into the show since the election, right? And that's what happens sometimes when you disengage, right? So it's not necessarily that I am the reason that occurred, but I do know that things occur when you put the appropriate amount of attention and care into it, right? And so not really knowing all the specifics of what the reasons were behind her show being canceled, I can't necessarily intelligently speak to that. Optically, it doesn't look very good. For anybody that's tapped into the specifics of just what it is optically, it doesn't look very good. But quick intro for those of y'all that are not familiar with me. I am the host of the Tequila Tales. And what is the Tequila Tales? The Tequila Tales is a fully engaging and highly interactive discussion on love and relationships. What it is not is a panel discussion. And I'm always certain to say that, right? And no shade to panels, but when it comes to panels, you're sitting there and you're listening to what other people think. You're listening to what their thoughts, and their beliefs. But what the Tequila Tells, our motto is, with love, we all have a story to share. And so, it's our goal to get those authentic stories, that authentic conversation from the culture itself, right? And so the script is kind of like the digital counterpart. It's a collaborative effort between the Tequila Tales and blackdoctor.org, which is an organization that really puts the spotlight on Black health. Whether you are looking for a physician and you want someone that you feel kind of understands you on a more, emotional and just even cultural level. Blackdoctor.org is a good resource to have, But yeah, like I said, I did, even though we are going to look back at one of my past episodes, so it'll be a bit of a rebroadcast. I did just want to kind of speak about it a little bit, and just to give some context to it. Tonight we delve into this topic that is both timely and critical, which is the sudden departure of Joy Reid from MSNBC and what this means for Black voices in media. For those of you all that are unfamiliar with Joy Reid, she is a trailblazing journalist and political commentator who has been a staple in progressive news reporting. And as the host, as the Read Out, she brought an unapologetic and deeply insightful lens to politics, race, and justice, offering a voice to communities often left out of mainstream narratives. But in a surprising turn of events, MSNBC recently announced the cancellation of the Read Out, and with it, Joy Reid's departure from the network. This decision has sparked a wave of reactions, from concerns about media diversity to questions about the future of Black political discourse in mainstream journalism. So for tonight, I did want to unpack what I believe this means and what does Joy Reid's exit signify about the state of media today. How does this impact Black journalists, media representation, and even activism? And most importantly, how do we sustain and support Black voices in journalism moving forward? So for those of you all that are not familiar with how this works, right, we're streaming across multiple platforms right now. So even if you are the only one that's sitting inside of that particular room, if you comment, I can actually read the comment and I can share it, right? So we can interact with it. So whether it is during this portion right here or even the part that I rebroadcast, we will have an opportunity to be able to interact with one another, via the chat. So if you all have any, thoughts, questions, concerns, don't hesitate to jump in, right? Like I said, it's being streamed across multiple platforms. But yeah, man, like I was saying a moment ago, man, when we all got the news, I think it did surprise many of us. It surprised us, but we weren't shocked, right? We weren't shocked because this is kind of like a trend. I don't know if it's something in the ethos, if the planets are aligned a certain way that just kind of has a heavy weight being placed on our shoulders, right? Regardless of whether it's directly or indirectly, it just feels heavy. It feels heavy. And it feels like sometimes when you speak about it, unless you are directly engaged in the culture, there's a lot of gaslighting that's also going on, right? Where people will make it seem like, you're just complaining or, you're race baiting or, they use all of these different things as if what we are witnessing right now isn't absolutely freaking absurd. You know what I'm saying? And so it gets to the point where, a lot of the celebrities, they haven't really said anything about it yet. And I don't expect them to, right? But just the fact that collectively it feels like everybody's just marching along, it causes us to almost want to pretend as if it's not happening, right? Like as if we don't talk about it, it just goes away. If we pretend like what we can sense, if you're tapped into just like the energy, like forget just what it looks like at face value. If you can tap into the energy, that right now to be brown in America feels a little different, right? The other side is cheering extra hard. You know what I mean? And they're cheering as if they've won also, which is the most hilarious ruse about it all, is that we actually all lose, but that's another topic for another night. Being Black in America specifically, man, it makes it feel like it's a little bit more of a target on our backs, whether it be, let me try to, from a media perspective, like put this weight on you, DEI, and we're doing all these, and I like the fact that as a community, we are pushing back against that narrative because we know that we really weren't the ones that benefited from it the most, right? We are like, okay, you guys, like there's a list, and at the top is white women, and then right beneath them, it's the LGBTQ community, and then there's disabled people. We like number 5 or 6 on this list. There's veterans, right? And then somewhere around 5 or 6, you get the Black people. But somehow we became the poster child of it, right? And I think because of that, if it forces us to want to fight on its behalf. And, on a personal level, I'm kind of indifferent, right? Because on one level, it's like, take it away. Because the majority of us that got in our positions, we got it on our own merit. So if you really want to be merit-based, we still gonna be in the house, right? Like there's me that understands that, but then I also understand the danger and just the argument that exalts anti-diversity, right? Because at our core, we are diverse, right? So even if we are number 6 on the list, we on the goddamn list, right? The moment that they say, hey, the list isn't important, then even though we've only been getting number 6, we go from getting number 6 to not getting anything at all. So we got to be careful with that argument sometimes, right? Because I feel like we get into that space where we want to be so like, and be totally disenchanted. And it's like, man, the rights that they are trying to roll back is going to set us back decades, right? Like, because the reason that they haven't been able to do it as openly as they want to now is because of the protections that the system accounted for, right? So when you had civil rights laws that were in place, if they did do these things, you could at least take them to court and win, right? So you could hit their pockets. They're trying to remove that. So it's like on one level, while I do understand that this shit does need to burn because a lot of people need to feel pain, they need to feel pain so that they can sober the hell up. I do understand that. On another level, I understand that with us being at the foundation, at the base, it is going to hit us the hardest, right? And so, you don't want to just be completely cavalier as it relates to how we view this space. And so I think that's the tone, that's the tenor that we find ourselves in, and many of us are coping with it different ways, right? Whether you are just, hey, I'm total hands off right now. It is what it is, like kind of like the prevailing narrative about the 92%. Like, nah, just black women are resting. You know what I mean? And I rock with it. I rock with it because black women need to rest, right? You guys have been doing so much. And even in your rest, you're still doing little things. But I appreciate the pullback, and even though you pull back just because of who you are, you can't completely detach, right? But I do believe that it is important that we continue to be in a space where we kind of let them figure it out a little bit, right? Because I don't think that we're in a space where we really can fight just yet. I don't think we can fight. We can, but I don't think that we are as organized as we need to be. Just this ain't a move where just protesting is going to be enough, right? Like, we actually need some strategy this go round. And one of the things that I think is going to continue to be important is going to be how we connect and what resources do we tap into where we feel like we can get authentic, legitimate communication. And that was one of the things that I think kind of concerns me about this Joy Ann Reid stuff, right? Is I'm seeing it from a space of what happens when we no longer have spaces and voices in mainstream media. Does it even matter anymore, right? Because I mean, the majority of us are consuming our information via online, right? I mean, Joe Rogan is more popular than any of these platforms are. So I mean, on one level, you say to yourself, does it matter? Right? I mean, it matters because she was getting a check. I like to see a black woman getting a check, right? I like to see any black person getting a check, right? So I mean, I don't want to see them let her go, but it's like, man, did you really just unshackle her, right? Where now really she can really tell you what the hell is on her mind. You know what I mean? Like maybe that is the shift that's also occurring, right? Is that more of us are stepping into this media space, but media just looks different now than it did traditional media. Nobody's really even consuming traditional media, period. So I don't know, man. I'm still weighing that because I do think that there are times where having centralized places where you can get trusted information becomes important, because that's also how we collaborate, right? So that we're not just all on our own thing. There is some sense of uniformity. And, it becomes difficult, man, to really assess what community is going to look like in the future. Like, what is community going to look like? Like, I don't know if you all even thought about that. Like, back in the day, it was so important to know even just who your neighbors were, because that was who you spent the most time with. We weren't all plugged into our devices. Even getting phone calls, like, you weren't just sitting on the phone all day. You was out living life. So you knew your neighbors. That was the sense of community, and then maybe work and things of that nature, when you would have a job for 10, 15, 20 years. But now most people are at jobs for what? Months, years? The longest is like 2.5 years. I think that might be max about what average is right now. It might be damn near almost at about a year and a half. I haven't checked industry in a while. But what does community look like? And what does community specifically look like for our people, right? What does community look like for our people? That's something that is it important to you? Is it important to you? What does it mean to have a community? Do you even care about having a community? What does it mean to be in solidarity? I mean, I know that continues to grow. I mean, I don't have the answers, but I do believe that with many of us at our core, we do still desire it. I think we do still desire it. I just think that community is going to take on a lot of different shapes as we move forward. And it's probably going to be different depending upon how you, I guess, what power you give to it. But, you know, like I said, nonetheless, oh, I got some comments. It matters from her producers and staff. Okay, yeah. Nah, I do agree with that. And that's what I was saying. When it comes to the money, like it's going to affect a lot of people. Yeah. He said, I totally agree with you. Thank you, naturally healthy. But yeah, no, you know, like I said, it was unfortunate. It was unfortunate. I follow her on social media, so I do appreciate her voice. So I don't feel like she's gonna go away in terms of the benefit that I get from her. Uh, but yeah, when it comes to, like I said, her show, you know, I had a conversation with my wife earlier, and I was like, as unfortunate as it is, and as bad as it looked optically, it is one of those things I say to myself, like, I wonder what the numbers look like. How many of us have been tapped in? And I'm not saying we should force ourselves to tap in, but just that's one of those unfortunate realities of what it means to be Black in America. Because she's doing very similar content to what Rachel Maddow is doing. And I'm pretty certain that Rachel Maddow's numbers are much bigger than hers. And no shade to Rachel, because she's been doing her thing for many years, and I'm a fan of hers as well. But Joy brings the heat, but I guarantee you that her viewing is not what Rachel's is. And it's for reasons why we know, right? And it's why it's difficult for us sometimes, because it doesn't matter how great you are, you're appealing to a particular demographic sometimes, especially when you're in this space that deals with popularity. We don't have the numbers. So even inside of the intellectual space, if you're a Black intellectual, you're appealing to a very narrow percentage, right? That's like 10% of the 10%. Whereas if you're just like white intellectual, like, okay, that's 10% of everything. That's a much bigger pie. You know, it's in similar spaces, it's going to always be more difficult sometimes for us to have the same kind of impact in that regard, right? And so that's just something that we have to understand. And I think because of that, it also should incline us to be that much more engaged with those things that does add value to us. Like we have to be super intentional. And that I think that's the big word moving forward. That's a big portion of activism moving forward, is going to be, how intentional are you? How are you spending your dollars? Because we are spending dollars, but are you willing to do the research to find out who are the Black people that are producing particular products so that you can support those things that you want to see more of? That is something that our community is going to have to get better with, you know, and I can see us figuring it out. I think we're going to have to, right, over these next couple of years, man, depending upon how it goes. That's going to be our way out. And we are going to need to find ways to not only remain connected, but to ensure that we are getting one another's messaging. And when I say being intentional, I mean, because you can't even just rely on your news feed, because that algorithm can dictate what it wants to show you. You can follow all Black creatives. It's going to put something else, you know, in front of you, right? And yeah, so this is going to be an ongoing conversation, you know. But those are just some thoughts that I had on my mind. You know, like I said, I did want to tap into you know, some segments to an earlier discussion that I had, man, with some really, really good friends of mine. These brothers are four of my best friends, or three. Well, no, actually it was four of my best friends, you know, that I've known throughout the years. And we really just had like a good conversation about men and our ability to be able to express affection and emotions, right? And it was just, you know, I felt like it was just a really good, very vulnerable conversation where there was quite a bit that got exchanged. So I was like, you know what, on this particular day, it would be dope to just kind of have a look back, you know. So hopefully you all enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed it then. And so that's what this is going to be. So this particular show for me is incredibly special. And I'm going to tell you guys why. And forgive me, because I'm a monologue for a moment. I actually had to write some things down so I can make certain that I paid the appropriate homage to the individuals that are going to be joining me on this. I don't even want to call it a panel, right? Because I just said all that stuff about panels. We'll call this a men's roundtable. This is kind of like an Avengers style roundtable of men who I honor to the utmost degree, right? Everyone that's going to be that's going to be engaging in this discussion, I've known for a minimum of 15 years. A few individuals from high school. I have some individuals on this particular live that I've known since high school. And so that in and of itself just says a lot, because, you know, to have the capacity and the ability to be able to have these relationships that continue to grow and that continue to add value for over 20 something odd years just means a lot. But seriously, you guys, like, I really want to say this, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. It is an absolute honor to have you all engaging in this discussion with me for just a myriad of reasons. You know, you gentlemen, and I mean this, and I don't say this lightly, you all are some of my favorite people on this planet. I have 4 of my absolute best friends. I think that you all are intelligent. I think that you all are ambitious. I think that you all are good-spirited, and honestly, just a lot of fun to be around. You know, when I see things online, you know, there's a lot of terminologies that get thrown around, you know, alpha this, alpha that, you know. And if we're being honest, a lot of people that subscribe to that ideology, to that doctrine, they're missing something to me in some very foundational elements. It's some very, very foundational areas. But the gentlemen that are going to be on this particular discussion, to me, in my estimation, are leaders amongst men. And I do not say that lightly. I think that everyone that is here on this live stream with me, they have shown themselves to me time and time again to be an individual, like I said, to be compassionate, to be intelligent. But if we being honest, man, y'all also, man, y'all kind of some players. You know what I'm saying? And I don't mean players in the sense of, you know, the typical sense, but you know, that term high value man gets thrown around a lot, right? But I think sometimes when they say high value man, they just talking about people that's earning some money, right? And to me, that is not the only element that becomes important when we're talking about judging someone's value and judging someone's character, right? And so the individuals that I have here, man, like, y'all are legit, right? And so with that being said, like, I really just, I wanted to really pay homage to what this discussion is, because you guys, the gentlemen that are about to join me on this discussion, these ain't the internet dudes. These ain't the podcast bros. These cats, they may have a social media handle, but good luck trying to get them to post something, right? They don't even comment in the comment section. So that's what's going to be exciting about this discussion, is I've gathered a group of guys that I think are the type of men that a lot of women are looking for when they are going out and looking for their significant others. But these ain't the type of dudes that y'all see in the comment section. These ain't the dudes that's arguing with women all day long, trying to ask you what you bring into the table. So that's what's going to be exciting about this conversation. And many of them don't even know what we're going to be talking about, right? Which I did not tell them prior to them hopping on this live, because I didn't want them to run away. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and add these gentlemen to the stage. I'm going to add Omar. I'm going to add my buddy Jesse. I'm going to add my buddy Charles and my buddy Raynell. And with that being said, gentlemen, welcome. You know, this is going to be a good discussion, man. Again, I don't want to keep big up in y'all, man, but I cannot say it enough, bro. Like, I thought I was going to get one of you all for this discussion, and then I was going to grab some other people. The fact that I got all 4 of y'all, like, dead ass, man. Like, I cannot explain. Like, I'm actually a little nervous, and I don't even think I would be nervous if it was like 1 million people watching right now. But the fact that I have who I consider to be my round table engaging in this discussion, it means a lot. And so with that being said, gentlemen, welcome.
Appreciate it. You made us sound like the guys that teamed up on Drake. You introduced us. Avengers.
Right. We all got excited about the takedown of Drake. You know what I'm saying? Right. Exactly.
So whose relationship are we taking down today?
Oh, Lord. Right, exactly. So listen, man. So look, we gonna jump right in because my goal was not to obviously keep you guys for an exorbitant amount of time, but we're gonna be talking about something that I feel we're all comfortable with, but that we, if we're being honest, don't even talk a lot about with one another, right? And the overall conversation that we're having is about emotions, right? Men and their emotions. And this conversation got triggered off of we had an event a couple of months ago, and it was called A Fish Out of Water. And so essentially what we were talking about was all the different areas that can lead an individual to feeling a bit out of place, whether it be technology, whether it be gender roles, or just whatever. And so the conversation came up about people's comfort with expressing their emotions, and specifically men. And the conversation really yielded a lot of, I thought, very profound topics. Some people made some really good points, but there was a woman in particular that made a point that in recent weeks I've been seeing. It's been getting a lot of tick online. It crossed 500,000 views last week. It's already at about 650 views. It may cross 1 million by next week. I can always tell when something is really picking up, but what's catching me off guard is who is engaging in this particular comment. And it's primarily men. And some of the things that they said, you get one off comment, you're like, all right, that's just a hater. Or you get another comment, it's like, all right, he just a lame. But then you start to see like this groundswell of the commentary, and I realized like, oh snap, like what this woman said really struck a nerve. And she wasn't getting at men. I think she was actually talking to other women, and she was talking about weaponizing men's vulnerabilities. So we'll go into that, because that's really going to be the center part or the centerpiece of this particular discussion. But where I kind of wanted to start us off at is just in a broad sense, talking about like our general expression of our emotions. And so what I wanted to ask you all to kind of start off with is, on a scale from 1 to 10, how comfortable would you say you are expressing your emotions? Not all at once.
Ike, let me just start by saying you did a good job. You kept the topic a mystery until we joined. And when I heard you say that we were going to be talking about emotions, I almost interrupted you and said, excuse me, I'm out. But to be honest, I am comfortable expressing them. I think the challenge is, who do you trust to be vulnerable like that? Because it's not something that's well received all the time, depending on who you're talking to, who you're interacting with. So I think we all probably have stories. As you get older, you have to be more selective about who you're giving your energy to. And so I think that's where the emotions come into play for me, especially as a man. I think there are expectations for how we're supposed to move, just from a cultural, societal standpoint. And some of those old tropes I kind of agree with. Maybe not all of them, and maybe not the way it's been sort of perpetuated in a lot of conversations today. But I think overall, it is something that I'm open to. I do acknowledge that maybe women have a stronger sense of managing emotions. I think that's something I can take my hat off to them too. I don't think that's stereotypical, but we can debate about that. But if I have to wade in those waters, I'm not afraid to do it, especially if buttons are getting pressed and, depending on the situation, if I'm coming in, emotions can be anger, sadness. It doesn't always have to be vulnerability. It can be expressing anger and really just, jealousy, a lot of things that sometimes we try and sidestep. So not to be long-winded, I definitely don't have a problem diving into that.
Okay. Anyone else? I want to know, like, what would you consider to be your level of comfort in expressing your emotions? And we're talking about just in general, right? because I just got into a conversation. Me and Ray was building a little bit the other day, and we were talking about how like sometimes it feels like as a Black man, anger is the only emotion that we're given the liberty to express sometimes comfortably, right? Like anytime it's any other type of emotion, there's always some type of indictment that's following that. And so I'm curious to know, like, how comfortable do you feel expressing your emotion? We're not even just talking about necessarily inside of a relationship space. It could be even inside of a workspace, right? You're dealing with microaggressions all day long, and you know if you say something, it's going to be received differently than if your counterpart says something, right? Depending upon the kind of office environment that you operate in.
I'll chime in really quick. I think the way I think about emotions, I mean, I think you said you brought up Black men, but I remember as a kid, there was a movie about Scott Joplin, who created the song for the ice cream truck, or that was later used for the song for the ice cream truck, and everyone knows that song. But anyway, there was this scene in the movie that it always stuck with me as a kid. But it was about when Scott Joplin's best friend was like murdered or something like that, or killed or died off or something like that. And he goes in front of his family, no emotions, just like blank stare. And he just goes upstairs to his restroom and just started bawling out. And he stayed up there for a little bit, and then he collected himself, came back down, and that was it. It was never talked about his emotions. And I felt like that was a representation of just like how men in general are supposed to act, right? We're supposed to always show strength, even when we are feeling weak. And that's the way I always kind of viewed it in general. Is like, you got to stay as strong as you can, whatever it is. And you should never feel vulnerable, I guess. You should always feel like you're in control of the situation, because again, like at the end of the day, you are the man. If we're looking at it from a traditional sense, that you are always in control, not only of the situation, but also of your emotions. And it's like, it's almost like if you're in the room and something crazy happened and someone's breaking in and you start screaming, and then the kids are screaming, the wife is screaming. They're like, all right, so we're just a family about to die all of a sudden because dad is losing it right now, right?
Yeah. We're looking bad as a unit right now.
He's just as scared as the kids,
yeah.
Right? So it's like, I think just like, I think there should be some outlets for men where they can, kind of show those emotions, because I think at the end of the day, it's like when you think about it, men have a lot of pent up energy, right? And and that's when you see men going off on stuff that's really kind of silly.
Right.
Like, did you really need to take it there for that situation? Because you're in the Walgreens right now, sir. I'm gonna need you to chill out. You just took this to a new level, right? And it's like that's all that pent up emotion and that energy. And I think there should be some kind of outlet where men can kind of really express their emotions. But again, I would just give my point that I think that we're just not, I think our generation, we're not taught to express our emotions, really, right? It's almost like, and not to be long-winded, but it's like when you were a kid, for those who had a dad in the house, when dad came in the house, he didn't talk to you.
Right.
He's like, the lights are on, there's food on the table. You don't need to talk to me. I really don't care. And that's just how it was in from the 50s and the 60s and even into the 70s. So I think our generation kind of adopted that a little bit. But I think the newer generation, like the Gen Zs, they're a little bit more, probably too much in touch with their emotions. But they're definitely in touch with them, right? So I'll step back from there.
No, you know what though? Because we will touch on that in a moment, right? Because I do think that there is on some levels, right, like a balance, as it relates to this space that we can find ourselves at, where it's like on one end there's us not expressing emotion at all, and some of the results that can happen from that. But then, like you said, with this generation, it's almost like, have they overcorrected on a level where everything, and not to throw out terminologies like they're too emo or anything like that, but there is a point where it's like you do just have to bury your head and get the work done. You know what I'm saying? And everybody doesn't always understand that. I do think that because we're becoming on some levels a little bit more emotionally aware of your mental and emotional state, we think that at all times, 24/7, your emotions are supposed to be coddled and catered to, right? And that's not always the case. In every environment, it's not always about you. And sometimes you just need to shut the hell up and get the job done, right? And so I do think that there is some space, or sometimes that we find ourselves in these spaces where we are noticing that there is a new breed of individual that's coming up that has an almost inability to be able to manage their emotions. And so, yeah, that was something that I was going to ask you guys, but
what's the opposite though, right? The opposite is toxic. To be too masculine is toxic.
Right.
Not enough emotions.
Right.
And I found that toxicity start to creep its way into the way men and women are perceiving each other in the dating realm, like in a very unfortunate way. And it sort of subscribes to the whole idea that good guys finish last. You know, you start to see that sort of unravel based on the fact that a lot of times I found that, and this could be seen sort of as inflammatory, but I do feel like it's very honest to say that a lot of times women will say that they want to see these traits in a man, being very emotional, being very in tune with that, wanting to cuddle, wanting to carry the puppy around in the back, but then be very attracted to the opposite. And so I think that's where they struggle, because they start, I do feel like at the end of the day, that's not what they're often dreaming of in a very desirable way. And so I think that's something that you have to grapple with, is when are you maybe giving up too much when you're trying to balance being emotional, being in touch with that, but then also sort of not giving it too much to the point where it starts to become unattractive from what I've seen.
Okay, and that's a good point, right? And like I said, in the moment when I play the clip, you'll even see why that exact point to me has so much validity, because that particular point that you just said right there, there was a comment that got made, and it's when I decided that, okay, instead of me just highlighting this particular clip for this particular segment of the script, I was like, this is actually kind of worthy of an entire conversation in and of itself, right? So I'm gonna play this clip in a moment, but before we go there, one of the things I wanted to talk about was, I feel like men, and specifically Black men, like I said a moment ago, we really aren't given much latitude when it comes to the expression of emotions beyond that of anger, right? But I question if it's always been that way, right? And so, I take music sometimes, for instance. I feel like over the years, music somehow has taken a very sharp turn, where in the earlier days, and we're talking about back in the Motown days, it felt like we were able to express our emotions, our adoration, our love for women. And now we're in this space where it's like, forget even people calling you a simp, but I'm like, even when you listen to the music, there's nothing about it that gives men the liberty to openly share their adoration, affection, or love for women. It's almost like somehow that is being cast away, right? And I'm like, when we came up, we came up in a period where even the players was the dudes that knew how to talk to women. They was the dudes that knew how to kind of interact with women and make them feel good. Even if you was a dog, even if you was just trying to get the draws, you wasn't gonna get the draws by trying to browbeat them over the head by how much they ain't it, and trying to belittle them. It was always like let me kind of feed into you and make you feel good as a woman, because as a man, you felt secure in your space. And now it's like we're in this day and age where it no longer feels like that is the impetus for interaction. And what I guess I'm trying to figure out is like, when do we hop off that track? Do you all have any idea of when we deviated, when society as a whole shifted away from, oh, this is what romance looks like. Oh, as a man, you're supposed to make women feel good, to like now we're combatants, and anybody that is showing the opposite of something, like you said a moment ago, Jesse, of something that's toxic, is seen as weak. And so I'm like, what do you all think was the catalyst for that? Like, where we're not even given the liberty to love openly without being ridiculed by our counterparts. Do you think that that was us, or do you think that that was them that created that?
That was a culture shift.
Mm.
It was a strictly culture shift, right? And the challenge with the way cultures move is that, you know, it depends on who has the loudest or the biggest megaphone, right? And they're going to be the ones to move the culture in a different direction. You know, if you think about, you know, during medieval times, whatever, when you courted a woman, you were most likely had to show up to her house with roses, and you had to show up with the wedding ring. You had to ask the parents, can I marry your daughter? You had to go through this whole thing. And the reason why they did that, or the reason why that was a thing back then, is because the parents didn't like that their daughters were being used by men. The men would just go sleep with them. There's no effort on their part, and then they would leave. Someone needs to mute. I don't know what that is. I know,
right? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Really where that's coming from.
It sounds like somebody cleaning a commercial building.
That's what I was trying to figure out.
I was waiting for somebody to say something.
Right, that's what I was trying to figure out.
Let's kick up the house cleaning rules. Let's kick up some house cleaning rules. You know, this is a black podcast. The engineer in the bathroom, all type of stuff happening. But no, what I was saying is just it's just like, you know, it's just it was a reason why that culture shift happened then. Where it's like, wait a minute, men just come.
Okay, I have to just step in for a quick second, because that moment was absolutely hilarious to me. So essentially what ended up occurring was I had a gentleman on that, you know, and that was one of my guys, man, but let's just say that wasn't one of his finer moments, right? And so it's just all kind of chaos that's happening in the background. And it got to a point where it was disrupting all of us. And I think once we finally realized what it was that was happening, you know, that's what happens when you have a live show. You know what I'm saying? But anywho, let's
coming over just to smash my daughter. They're not really serious about it. And then they put into place, nope, you need to save up for a ring. You need to save up for a house. You need to do that, this, and that. And then you had to have that in place in order to, you know, to court the daughter or whatever. And so that was a culture shift. And then to your question earlier around like, where did this new shift come from? It's basically a new culture shift, right? We talked about being toxic. Women were like, wait a minute, this is toxic. Someone called that out, like, oh, you shouldn't be in a traditional type relationship. You're just as valuable as the man. You should demand these things in a relationship, and the man should do this. So again, another culture shift happens, right? In terms of what is the role of a male, right? What's the role of a woman? And those are culture shifts. And I think the challenge with that, with the challenge that comes with that is that the only time you have these culture shifts is in a progressive society. You can only talk about, you only have culture shifts in a society that is able to progress. Because if you think about in the Middle East, it's still a traditional relationship between a man and a woman. The government, the society, the religions, they don't really care what you think. They don't care what you call toxic, right? They're like, yeah. But this is the way things are. But because we're in the West, where we're always trying to find the best solution for everyone, you know, you're going to have these culture shifts happen. And again, you're not going to have a lot of people agree with them, but you might have, you know, the majority of people that do agree with it to an extent. But then again, once the pendulum swings, it swings, and there's no pulling it back now.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I've and tell me what you all think about this, because I'm gonna share what I know sometimes is the prevailing narrative on the internet, right? And the internet can be very polarizing. It's either this or it's that. And so the way that they've seen it sometimes is from the male perspective, and I don't know if this is the male perspective, but there are many individuals that will say that they believe that this was a result of like the welfare state, right? That the moment that welfare came in, Black women were incentivized to not have a man in the household and not have a man be a part of that particular union. And so over a period of time, that kind of metamorphosized into just us gradually pulling ourselves apart as women become more independent, as different types of roles in society open up. Now, all of a sudden, there's this belief that women don't need men. And so just gradually, it just kind of erodes the fibers that are generally allowing us to connect. Other individuals will say that as women became more independent and as society began to shift, Black women started to get greater education. They started to dig deeper and work on themselves and develop, and Black men got left behind. And as a result, we now feel inadequate because we can't necessarily go toe to toe for them. And so that is what you're seeing as being the largest chasm that is between men and women, specifically inside of our culture, is because men want women to still be subservient, even though they aren't making the same types of personal investments in themselves to kind of level up, right? And that is what kind of created the chasm. Do you all think that either side has validity? Do you think that one side holds more weight than the next? Or do you think that this is just fodder for the internet and just something for us to kind of argue about?
I'll hop in there real quick. Just because
I like when I get y'all thinking.
I think you were generalizing
Okay.
with the welfare state. Like not every Black person was on welfare. And so I think there's a bit of generalization there. But if we look at that, could we say that even though there was a generalization, there was a small pocket of people that participated in that program? Did that culture cause a shift amongst the larger society of the Black community? I think that's a question that you would also have to address as well, right? Because I think that there were either, during that period, the 60s and 70s, during like the introduction of welfare, there were plenty of Black people that were doing pretty well, that were in stable relationships, that, were raising families, right? Not everyone, or everyone that's of darker complexion came from a broken household, right? Or their dad was, quote unquote, not allowed in the house because the mom was on welfare. I think there was definitely a percentage of people that participated in that program, but I think the Black society at large during that period, I don't think that was a thing that I could point to and say, yes, that's the reason why you had this culture shift.
Okay. That's fair. Anyone else? Does anyone else have any thoughts on this particular topic as it relates to, like I said, because I've even inside of our discussions, man, like there was one particular month where, and it didn't, it never turned into an argument, but it did get rather like a rather heated exchange as it relates to one man's staunch feeling that this is kind of what created this rift, and his whole thing was that he kind of felt like he acknowledged that he felt that Black women were the anchor and the pillar of our community, but he felt like today's Black woman no longer wants to bear, that weight, that burden.
Why should she? Why should she? Good for her. Good for her. Because they're better off when they don't have to. And that's just the truth. I like them better when they don't have to, and because there's a lot that comes with that, and that's not what this discussion is about. But I think that if I were to try and take it and kind of bring things back to where we started, their ability to anchor their emotion into different areas of their life, given whatever they're obsessed with or whatever is their focus at the moment, it shows through how well they've done having to pick up the slack. Some people may not like to hear it said that way, but in a lot of these households, they are picking up the slack, regardless of what the decisions were, because most people that are living today weren't making those decisions. They're the byproduct of it. So they're trying to navigate the outcome. But I think the reality is that they are very emotional creatures, and they are able to channel that into other areas. It's not just about laughing and crying. And I think that's important too. It's sort of how we're channeling our emotion. I think sometimes men can channel that into wanting to be so many different things for other people. And so it may not give them time to cry because you're channeling your emotions in other ways, which will make you work that extra shift, that overnight shift, do the things that are uncomfortable. Sometimes emotion powers you through those things as well.
Okay. So now I'm about to play the clip that brought us here today. Some of my guys are having some internet issues. So if you all see a little bit of spotty behavior, then, just kind of bear with us. Everybody doesn't have, the luxury of, the fiber optic, the Cox fiber optic that I have right now. Like my speeds are outrageous. So that's why I look so glorious. But nonetheless, I do want to play this clip because this is actually the impetus that made me want to have this particular discussion, right? And just so you all know, those of you all that are, regardless of what platform you're watching it on, because this is being streamed to about 6 different locations, when you comment, I can see it, right? So if you all want to engage in the discussion, regardless of whether or not that particular platform that you're watching this from is lit, I not only do see the comments, but I have the ability to show the comments, right? That shows what it is that you all are saying, right? So just know that if I see something that I think is engaging or intriguing, I will not only post it, but it will become a part of the discourse. But with that being said, I want you all to watch this particular clip because, again, this is why I brought you all out. And this was the comment that's been getting a lot of traction. And now you'll see why I started where we started, just in this overarching conversation about emotions. But now we'll go ahead and take the pivot.
Men ask my husband all the time, how you don't be thinking about other women, bro? Like, is it hard for you not to cheat? I'm like, what do they mean? Is it hard? You have everything you need at home. I come from a household. I come from a mother that will tear her man down with her tongue. I come from a mother that I'm like, Ma, you should not be saying that to a man. So that's where I come from. And I wholeheartedly believe that it's required for any healthy relationship, for your marriage, your relationship to be your safe space. I don't need you to go outside of this home to talk to your friends that don't know nothing. I don't care. Some of these men is dumb. Some of my husband's friends, they dumb. Y'all don't know nothing. Y'all not even married. But to be able to come to me, and it's so important that it is a heavy responsibility, ladies. It's a heavy responsibility that when a man confides in you to let you know his weakness, you're not packing that away as a weapon later. Because that's what the fear is. The fear is she gonna use this against me later. She go, oh, you was crying about your daddy issues 2 days ago, but now you don't no man wanna hear that. No man want you to use their vulnerabilities as a weapon. That's the fear. But I thrive in the comfort of knowing that my man, he knows he's safe. It would hurt me to know that he finds a safe space with his friends, but he created this union with me. He said he was going to figure this out with me. It's not realistic to sustain a relationship depending on outside people. The first thing me and my husband do, I do go out and vent with my friends because I'm a woman. Girl, he ain't do this right? However, there is not a conversation that I have ever had with my husband that was not had with us first. He knows everything. He knows how I feel. I know how he feels. Is it still challenging until this day for him to still open up? Absolutely. But every single time he opens up, I reassure him, I got you. I'm your rock right now. Because it's not realistic for us to want these men to just be strong 24/7. They're human. They have hurt feelings. They've been through trauma. And us as women have to allow that space for them. Otherwise, you're not going to have a long-lasting marriage, a relationship. Because what do men do when they don't feel valued? They don't feel loved. They go outside of their home. Men ask my husband all the time, How you don't be thinking about other women, bro? Like, is it hard for you not to cheat? I'm like, what do they mean? Is it hard? You have everything you need at home, but when you don't, when your wife or when your girlfriend is weaponizing all of your vulnerabilities, you gonna go to somebody else. You're gonna look outside the home, or you're just gonna suffer in silence. So I do believe that it's required for a man and women to open up emotionally to one another in order to thrive in a relationship.
So, I thought that first off, the woman that made that particular comment, she had made another comment earlier that evening that I thought was, in my own personal opinion, it was one of the best comments that I've ever heard in the 11 years of us hosting this particular show. And I've heard some incredible things, but she kind of shared about how, her husband has multiple sclerosis. And as a result, he has been limited in his capacity to be able to provide. And so even though she initially had this belief that, she was going to kind of be living the soft life, when life threw them a curveball, they had to adapt, and it wasn't a sad story. It was like an incredible story about just the resilience of love, right? And so I was a big fan of her, period. And so then she goes and makes this comment. I'm like, okay, another solid comment. I posted, and you never really know what's going to catch people's attention, but this particular comment, it did generate a lot of feedback from men, right? And so I'm gonna just show you guys some of the discussion, or some of the things that men were saying as it relates to this particular discussion. Hold on one second. Let me go ahead and pull it up. There we go. Okay. So, occasionally you'll get these type of comments, right? Women these days aren't built like this. Can fight on her if you want to. All you're doing is providing her the ammo to take you down at the earliest inconvenience, right? Then you get stuff like this. Never show them your weakness. They'll just throw it in your face later every time. Being vulnerable to a woman is like bleeding next to a shark. I'm sorry, I can't be vulnerable again, right? 100%. That's why Black men venture out to other races of women, because Black women don't make a safe space to talk with them. It's my opinion. It's what I've experienced. And so there was a lot of that, right? And those typically aren't the type of comments that I'll key into, especially not the ones where we try to make an excuse as to why someone dated someone of a different culture, because to me, don't minimize that, right? Like maybe they just love that person. Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with some pathology or, I hate it when we reduce complex topics to something that's so ridiculous. But it did feel like the algorithm was sending a lot of men that had experienced this type of someone weaponizing their vulnerability. And so that's when I was going to ultimately make this a conversation, period, right? But then this particular comment came up. And when this comment came up is when I was like, you know what? This might actually be worthy of highlighting this and making this the subject matter for the entire show. Guy said, a lot of women don't use our vulnerability as a weapon, but they will still determine their idea of us by that weakness and won't be able to see us as an upright and steadfast man anymore, no matter how much of a man we are to them, we are to and for them. This makes them lose respect for us as time goes on. After a while, they'll start disagreeing with us more, no problem. But then they'll start raising their voice at us more, start being more combative with us, stop trusting our provision, and stop submitting to our individual inner wisdom as a man. They don't have to weaponize our weaknesses directly. Oftentimes, it happens gradually and unnoticeably. And so that for me was when I was like, oh, okay, wait a minute, pause. You know what I mean? Like, all right, now we're going into another realm that's making this a more nuanced discussion, because most sensible women would not want to use your emotional moment and throw it in your face. Some may, all of us can be underdeveloped. And there were a lot of people in the comments that kind of pointed out that men can do this too. And so I want to be clear that this conversation is not an indictment on women. It's not saying that I believe that, oh, women, y'all need to get better with this, right? Because in all honesty and actuality, we can do that same thing too. We all have the potential to weaponize vulnerability. But what this gentleman said to me introduced the caveat, which is where we start to discuss how there is this perception of what masculinity is, right? And it's not standard. It's not a fact as to what's masculine and what's not masculine. But if masculinity is what the woman was attracted to, and then all of a sudden you show this weakness, as you pointed out to a moment ago, Omar, when you was just like, if shit is going haywire in the house, and then all of a sudden as a dude, you the same one screaming and wilding out like everybody else. I can't remember what comedian that was just like, oh, and he screamed real loud. And it's like, as a man, you can't do that. Your woman ain't gonna look at you the same, right? Like, so as a man, we have to hold tight to whatever this idea is of masculinity or whatever our role is, so as the world may be evolving and attempting us to redefine what masculinity looks like, all right, have at it. And intellectually, a woman might agree with some of the spaces that you're going into, but if that affects her libido, then what, right? Then what? So this isn't even a matter of us just having this conversation about how we feel emotionally. How we feel intellectually, because we can intellectualize our emotions all we want to. Sometimes how we feel just don't make sense, right? And so that is when I was like, okay, I need to get some gentlemen in the room to figure out how do we feel about this, right? Because this is a more nuanced and complex discussion once we start to talk about how the moment that we don't fit into the safe confines of what it means to be a man, masculine, and specifically a black man, the moment that we deviate from that, we run the risk of losing the attraction and the desire of those people that we are attempting to pull into our world. So like, what's you all's feedback on that? I'm curious.
So I will say this, Isaac. Had we been having this discussion a few years ago, I would 100% agree with the statement or the comment that you just read from that gentleman. I felt and believed the same things that he believed. If you share, yeah, it's okay to share. It's okay to be vulnerable. They may not weaponize it, but it's, at some point they are going to, subconsciously or consciously see you differently. And I believe as a man, we want to be seen in a certain light, right? And we believe that if we share that information with them, they will see us as less of a man, less masculine. And I say that if we were having this conversation a few years ago. Today, as I sit here, I think and I feel differently. Life has a way of putting your weaknesses, right in front of you, and the ability to share, the ability or willingness to share my emotions was something that I struggled with. I outright refused to do for most of my life. But when you're forced to, when you get into a situation, when you care enough about someone, and you see the only way through this right here is to open up, you start to, if you truly love that person and care about that person, you're forced to, right? Because that person, that relationship means more to you than that fear of vulnerability that you've been carrying with you forever, right? So you're forced to work on that, right? And I'm working on that right now today, being more vulnerable, more communicative about my feelings and my emotions, all of those things right there. I have to put aside the fear. I have to put aside the fear and trust her enough with my deepest and darkest secrets, my most vulnerable, situations, past traumas, because in order for us to sustain our relationship, she has to understand me and understand who I am and know who I am. And if she doesn't know who I am, it is hard for her to support me and be the woman that I expect her to be for me, because she's only given part of me. She doesn't have access to all of me. So she's not really playing with a full deck, right? It's like we're playing, spades or whatever, and I kind of rigged the deck to where I'm getting all 13 spades. She got none of them, right? So like, how can how am I setting her up to win? So I will say that it's growth, right? It's growth. It is taking sort of an introspection of yourself, right? To try to understand where that comes from, right? And I was able to kind of put a finger on it. I was groomed that way, right? I was raised that way. I was taught not to share my emotions, just the opposite of what's expected of men today, right? I was raised that way, right? So it's hard to change that, right? But I will say you can change it. We as men, we can change it. And I think that we're going to have to change that, right? In order to have the type of relationships, healthy relationships that we want, we're going to have to make this change, even though it goes against everything that we were, as men, we were taught, how we were raised to, never show your emotions, never let a woman see you sweat, never cry in front of a woman, all these type of things, right? But in doing that, I realized that it just hasn't worked, right? It hasn't worked. I've had many failed relationships, and at the end of them, it was always the I would say that common thread was I just didn't open up. I wouldn't open up. I wouldn't share. I wouldn't be vulnerable, and they didn't know how to love me. So. I'm working on it, but I do think that, some women, of course, they're going to do that, right? But if you find that right woman, and the woman that you have, right? Like you know her. And if you're with her and you're feeling that type of way, if you got a queen or if you got a thought, right? Like, this, right? Like, this. You know if you got a queen or if you got a thought. If you got a thought, keep your emotions to yourself. If you got a queen, level up. Level her up. Right, level her up so that she's right there with you, side by side, so you all can kind of press forward on this journey together, and be whole, happy, but most importantly, healthy in your relationship.
Okay, that's solid.
I think he just dropped it, right, and I think that's what we were getting to, right? When you think about overall, it's like, who is your partner, right? If your partner is toxic, you probably shouldn't share information that's going to hurt you in the future, but you also shouldn't be with that person if you can't share that information. So I think that's the biggest takeaway, right? That if you had information weaponized against you, you were with the wrong person. So let's start with your choices on who you're going after, right? But you shouldn't blame an entire gender of people for doing something that's as like Ray said, like some of us are brought up to be masculine and to, you know, hide our emotion, just like some people are brought up to weaponize emotions against people, right? So it's that mismatch that maybe that's what we're doing wrong, right? If you date the right people, as Ray said, you date a queen, she's not going to do that. It's not in her character to do that. That's not how she's built. But if you're dating someone that's a little bit grimy, of course they're going to use any information against you when they see you at your lowest. They're going to kick you when you're down. That's just how some people are, and they were taught that way. It's part of their upbringing, just like it's part of our upbringing, just to keep our emotions to ourselves, right? Not necessarily like someone's going to use them against us. That's just the way we were taught, right? To keep it to yourself, man up, as they say, man up, hold it in. You like, but my finger is coming off, right? And it's like, just hold it in, man up. And
right,
your arm
right.
like twisted like way to the back, and it's like, man up, keep it inside.
Right.
You
It's
know?
If I'm being totally honest, you know, when I think back here right now, you know, I've never really felt that safe in a relationship, right? Never really felt that safe with women. I mean, really outside of my mother, right? Like she's the one who I would, you know, go and confide my deepest vulnerabilities to and secrets to, you know what I'm saying? Because I trust her. Why? Because my mom has created that safe space for me to operate in. So I do think too that women, they have a responsibility and a duty to create that safe space for you, right? Very obvious, right? Like every chance that they get, they need to be able to, you know, show us that we can trust them with, you know, our big secrets and our small secrets, or our small secrets and our big secrets. We need to be able to trust them in doing that, just like I trust, you know, my mother. I need to find a woman that I can share that same level of trust with, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, man. And it's one of those things where it's like there are times where when you've lucked up and you found someone that you vibe with, where you do feel that level of vulnerability with, and that's why I think that in the onset, when that particular clip first got published, for me it feels like anybody that refutes what she's saying, that's the easiest red flag to spot from a mile away, right? But then there are other times where I think that the gentleman's comment that came literally just a couple of days ago that really caught me off guard was, it's like there are times where you may tell yourself that this is the right thing to do. Even just us as men, there are times where you're like, I should like this girl right here, right? She's a good girl. She'll be good for me. She'll do, but she don't push her buttons the way that this other person does, right? And what that shows is the disparity between what you think versus how you feel, right? Like how big the chasm is between your heart and your head. And essentially what you're trying to do is figure out where can you get them to meet. There are times where a woman, and I know that this may be a slight deviation, and not to get weird on the on the stream with you gentlemen, but I don't know if y'all ever watched Insecure, right? On HBO when it was streaming. But I remember that one of the major themes during this one season was where Issa's good friend was dating this dude, and she later found out that he went through this explorative state where he had a relationship with a guy, right? But I guess he realized, no, that ain't what I want to do. And then all of a sudden he gets in this relationship with her. And when she found it out, Yeah, logically, she knew. Oh, you know what? If I was a woman and I said I had a homosexual relationship, you know, or a bisexual relationship with a woman, shit, us as men, we might be like, man, that's kind of sexy. Like we will be way more forgiving than a woman would. But I'm saying us, we understand that. We understand that. We understand that the moment you found out that he explored and did something different than what was that was considered or deemed appropriate or permissible by woman standards, we don't follow the same rules over here, right? And so her as a woman, she lost interest in him. As attractive as she thought he was, as much as he was pushing all the buttons, the moment she got that piece of information, her mind turned off, right? And so I'm not saying that us sharing our emotions is tantamount to that, but it could have a similar effect, right? Where a woman sees you in this moment, and then all of a sudden it's almost like you're snatching down the veil and you're showing her that who the wizard really was all along, right? That the wizard really wasn't this big, powerful being, which is what she was attracted to, right? She was attracted to you for your strength. She was attracted to you for all of the elements that we consider to be masculinity. You know what I'm saying? That's what she was attracted to. And everybody isn't ready to accept the nuance of the reality that we feel pain too, right? And so, you know, it will be easy for us to just say like, oh, well, then that's an indication that that's not the one for you. And it's like, yeah, but how many times in life do we check all of the boxes that someone is interested in, right? It's like the 80-20 rule. Like all of us are searching for that significant other that meets 80% of what we're looking for, with the acknowledgement that the 20% is the things that maybe we do want, but you know what? This 80% hopefully outweighs the 20%. But what if one of them things over in that 20% is something that shifts her perception of you? And like I said a moment ago, now all of a sudden she's no longer physically desiring you or emotionally feeling synced in with you because of her awareness of a perceived weakness that she believed, you know, she didn't know existed, right? And so that is why, to me, I was like, this is an interesting conversation, right? Because
real quick,
you know, I don't want to just be like, oh, well, she should just find somebody else. Oh, well, then you as a dude, well, maybe that ain't the one for you. It's like, all right, so now I'm gonna go find someone that's comfortable with that. But
so here's my thing, because I think we still generalize a little bit, because I want to know, like the nerdy community, right? Like the people who go to like the Comic-Con and stuff like that. Is there masculinity in that group, or toxic masculinity in that group? Do you think? That's just a question, right? Like, do you think that group of people deal with these same things? Is it like, oh, I know your bitch ass ain't talking. You were crying when so-and-so scooped up the last Pokemon in the neighborhood, right? You know what I mean? Like, do you think they deal with those sort of issues, or is that just a sub part of the community that deal with this sort of toxicity?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or do you think the nerdy crowd, do you think they deal with these same issues? Because I don't think so. I think it's a whole different community. And I think a lot of those guys in that community are very expressive when it comes to their emotion. And they attract the nerdy girl, right? Like
I don't know. I'm gonna have to push back on that. I've had conversations with some, and here's some of the feedback that I've gotten from the marketplace within that age group, specifically that characteristic that you described, right? That they've never approached a woman in person. If they've dated, it's always been with an app. And this is the younger crowd. And I think some of them often are, you find more often than not, I think with the academic crowd, the ones who have really excelled when it comes to like studies, books, certifications, associations, I think they often will be the ones that are more socially awkward, um, because they oftentimes are just so hyper focused on academics or achievement or invention. And we're very grateful for those people. They serve their, their purpose in society. But I think at the end of the day, this is definitely bigger than, a certain like group of people, whether it be ethnic, um, class. I think it transcends all those things. And I truly, and I think it gets, to your point, I think it is probably heightened as you start to go into areas where there is like extreme poverty and crime. To your point, Omar, I think that's when you can start to see some disparity between what the expectations are for masculinity versus those who are in a country club environment. I think that's when the expectation starts to really change quite a bit. So not to even like make fun of what like the point you were making, I think it definitely it exists. And depending on where you are found, you can have a woman that thinks so highly of you in one of those areas, and you go to another one, and you are the same person, and you're looked at completely different in terms of what's appreciated when it comes to masculinity, what's valued. I think a lot of those things will change depending on who you're talking to, which makes it gets a little tricky. It's really not. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you. So you don't think the men that run in that, and I'm talking about the Comic-Con crowd, right? Not the Harvards and the Yales of the world. I'm talking about the nerdy kid that watches Japanimation cartoons. I think those kids are a little bit more in touch, or not kids, but those male individuals are probably more in touch with their emotions than other men. Were you excluding them, or were you pointing out that them too?
I was arguing that I think it transcends. I was probably arguing that I think if I were to compare myself to someone like that, and I were to say, okay, which of us is more likely to be an emotional person? I don't think that I would gravitate towards someone just because they were like into, I don't know. I feel like the Comic-Con connection makes it a little bit more general than I think we would expect.
So let's go with Terrence Howard, that type.
You said Terrence Howard.
Like super intelligent, kind of nerdy.
You think, and you're saying he seems to be a very emotional person.
Yeah, he's in touch with his feelings.
So that definitely supports your argument.
Okay. So
because remember, he threw the baby in the trash in Empire.
No. That wasn't Terrence Howard. That was Lucius Lyon. That's a difference. You got Terrence Howard, and then you got Lucius Lyon. Okay. So as we round this discussion out, right? Like, because we touched on it earlier, and I am curious to get you all's perspectives, though, because we've all acknowledged that as we continue to grow inside of this space, like the value of us being able to express our emotions, right? Because regardless of whether or not we can express our emotions, we do know that we're all feeling them, and our inability sometimes to express them can lead to very unhealthy ways of how they eventually come out, right? And so, we're all on board with what we see as a push towards mental health, and specifically Black men engaging in this mental health space, and even recognizing that there's nothing wrong with, talking to a professional, right? Like, and you don't have to wait until things are calamitous before you decide to speak to someone. It's like, they know that as you are nearing, inside of your 40s and your 50s, you need to go and get your prostate checked out, right? Like, you should not wait until the walls are falling down or the house is burning before you decide to go and check up. So we all on board with that. But as we just kind of alluded to a little bit early in the discussion, we're talking about that there are times where it's like you said, like you kind of need to man up, right? Do you think that we are in a space where the pendulum has swung a little bit too far into that space, and now this new generation is starting to deviate, or they don't have a solid understanding of, what, I don't know if I want to go as far as say what our role is, but just what life looks like, right? That there are times where you do just have to sit in the cut and deal with discomfort, that there was something noble about that period when, I'm not going to say when men used to bottle our emotions up, but when we understood that we had to push through it, right? Like we had to push through it and we had to conquer our fears. We had to face our fears and we had to conquer them. And it wasn't always this expectation that the world around us is going to coddle us. What's your emotions as it relates to that? Like, yes, we're leaning towards growth. Do you think we've gone too far? Do you think it's just enough? You know what I'm saying? Or do you think that we're a little out of whack right now and we still haven't found our sense of balance?
We are out of whack. We're out of whack. We are definitely whack as a society. We are doomed as a society. Unfortunately. I mean, just think about like again, we talked about culture and how things tend to shift, but think about it like this. Think about who, and we may have had a conversation about this before, but think about when we were growing up, who our heroes were, right? Who we looked to on television. I remember, even before the Michael Jordans hit the screen, like we looked up to Mr. T. He had the cartoon and everything. Like he was a masculine dude. He had all the chains, and he had he was part of the A team, and right. He did all these things. But those are the individuals you looked up to. You remember Bo Jackson? There were these like men, right? Like guys we looked up to. And I think if you look at like who people look up to nowadays, it's totally different. It's a different game out there now. It's like, and if you think about, we talk about how we were raised and how we grew up and just the people we looked up to, it was just different. And, we didn't have that balance back then. I think, men were just always taught to be hard all the time and, and not to have the emotion. And so, of course, when you were young, you looked up to people you idolized, right? And they didn't necessarily have to be the toughest guy, but they had to be that guy at some point. Like Michael Jordan was that guy for basketball. So you looked up to him if you were in the sports, right? And so I think, having those role models in place were essential for people like us growing up during that era. But I think today it's very hard to find those individuals because if you think about it, who does everyone look up to today, right? It's the futures of the world, right? It is the toxic people, right? that they look up to because being toxic is cool. Even if you think about, Black Twitter, like, Black Twitter can be used for good, but then it could also be used for being toxic, right? But what do people love about Black Twitter? When it's toxic, that's when they like it. That's when they love it. Like we tend to gravitate towards things that don't help us as a community versus the things that do help us, right? And it's like, we got to get back to that. And that's why I'm like, we kind of screwed as a society, unfortunately.
like most things, if not all things, too much of anything is not good for you, right? So I think we have to find that balance, right? Being overly sensitive or, at that end of the spectrum, it's not going to be good, right? Like we're going to be perceived a certain way. It's definitely going to have some type of effect on our relationship. And being too masculine, not willing to open up at all, not willing to confide in our loved ones, allow them to know who we are, that as well is not going to bode well in a relationship, right? So I think it's important that we try to find that balance, right? Where we can, as men, we can still be men, be, masculine and be the role, or play the role that we were created to play, right? Or the role that we were created to be in. and women have to do the same thing. And we have to somehow find a way to find that balance to come together to where everyone feels, valued, appreciated, respected, and able to just continue to grow with one another. So,
okay. So, gentlemen, man, I can't say this enough, man. And I mean this. I love you guys. Before I wrap, any final thoughts? Any final thoughts to the group? You know what I'm saying? I told you guys I was gonna keep us tight. I told y'all it'd be about an hour, a little bit over. I got permission to go a little over an hour. You know what I'm saying? I heard it was 88 degrees in Chicago and shit. So I don't want to keep y'all too long. I get it, right?
But I don't know, but here's
final thoughts.
I'll throw a fun fact out there, and I'd love to open this up for the group, because we always talk a lot about relationships and where to meet people. Did you know that LinkedIn has become the place for dating now?
Really?
For the age of 35, wow. Between 35 and 40, people are finding love on LinkedIn, right? So
are they sliding in DMs on LinkedIn?
Remember that was frowned upon back in the day.
Are you like waiting to meet somebody at a conference? Like, how is this unfolding?
No. I'm gonna tell you right now. I know exactly how this is happening, and I wanted to act surprised by that fun fact, but it makes sense because let's be real, right? About 10, 15 years ago, what did we see happen in Chicago was the explosion of all of those networking functions, right? And all they were like meat markets. All it was, hey, women, this is where you go to find out what kind of jobs that men have. And I remember there was this one that you would go to where, depending upon your industry, you had a color-coded like name badge. And I'm pretty certain that if you were in engineering, you know what I'm saying, or something that or technology, something that looked like it made money, that's probably where all the people were gravitating towards. You know what I'm saying? So it does make sense, because I used to have women that would slide in my DMs on some business. Hey, listen, I've been listening to your podcast, and I just wanted to meet up with you for a second. I just want to tell you about these things. And it's like, girl, stop it. Like, that was your little slick way of hollering. So I honestly, that makes a lot of sense.
Omar, how did you hear about this, man? How do you know about this?
Well, being a former LinkedIner, but it's also
ears to the streets.
It's also all over.
Keeps his ears to the streets.
It's actually all over the news. But the thing is, I think what's happening is that, it was frowned upon back in the day, because guys were trying back in the day. You would hear about all the time, like sliding the DMs, especially if you work with like really attractive women. You would hear them complain about it. But I think the game has changed now. And again, I think dating someone on a professional level, you get to know what type of person that is versus who they are on the dating sites. Because you can be wherever you want to be on the dating apps. But on LinkedIn, I can see you work at Boeing. So I want the Boeing you when you show up. I don't want the party boy. I want to see you in a professional setting. Like, that's what I'm into. Would
you say? Oh, I want the you that's aware of consequences and repercussions, right? I want the you that know you might lose your job if you come at me sideways.
Exactly. Like, I can call you about to lose your job.
That's game. That's game. But I'm gonna tell you what somebody said at one of the shows about a month or two ago. I always open up for the people that like are interested. Because we got people that are in relationships, people that are married, people that are single and looking. And there was this woman that she said this, and I'm gonna just lay this out here because I didn't even think about this. She said, if you are looking for a man, she said the gym, which surprised me because I was like, oh, I thought women didn't want to be hollered at the gym. I thought that was like their sanctuary, their safe space. But she dropped this little gem. She said, oh no, you need to get there between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. because the men that are the doctors, the lawyers, the engineers that got to get to work, that's when they are at the gym. I said, oh, wow, that is a level of strategy.
After
that I
that
didn't
is the
even know
stay-at-home
existed.
dance. After that is the stay-at-home dance.
A bunch of artists and wannabe rappers show up later on in the day. They don't want us. You know what I'm saying?
I did hear that the gym is kind of like the new nightclub for meeting people. Right?
Interesting.
Except with all the drunkenness and the out of shape, you're actually meeting someone that cares about their health, they're in shape, and they're not wasted, right? So it's like you get to meet a different version of them. So I kind of agree with that.
Hey, look, I respect it. I respect it. Any final words before I wrap? Any final words, gentlemen?
Oh, well, there was a question in the chat if you wanted.
Oh, snap! Hold on.
I think it's a pretty good one.
Oh, it show Liz. Oh, look at that. Yeah, they sure would jump in all of a sudden. So they said, does men date a woman or does he date his ex? Oh, do men date women or do they date their expectations? Okay. So, I'm assuming that was probably autocorrect, but do men date women or do they date their expectations? I'm
gonna let somebody else take this one.
Right. That's a good question.
I think men and women date their expectations until they figure out what you are. How can you even help anyone understand who you are within a few minutes of meeting them? It's impossible. You have to take a chance. You take a look at somebody that maybe a few things you like, and from there you say it's worth exploring. You explore. But if I have some expectations coming in, I mean, I think that's par for the course. It's going to happen. And that's probably the only reason you get the date. It's probably the only reason you're going to get the date. I mean, the woman has already sized you up. I mean, most of them will say they can determine right away whether or not you're someone that they'll sleep with within a few minutes of meeting. So expectations do get set, and I think it happens on both sides. So I would avoid trying to pinpoint that on men and make this emotional conversation even deeper than I think it needs to be. We just need to be masculine out here. We're not hitting women over the head and dragging them into caves. We're not doing those things. I think as a man who has a daughter, I definitely expect certain standards to be met with the way she is treated. But I expect a man to lead because he's established himself as a leader, whether that be, financially, whether that be with the way he treats his friends and his family and the community. There's a number of different ways you can do that, and you have to earn it. And so, I mean, I'm a big fan of that as well. So not to just make it seem so chauvinistic. I do think that's something that needs to be earned, and I think women will agree. They would like to be able to just take a step back sometimes. Who wants to deal with the horrors of the real world? Let the man do it. And if the man is feeling so emotional where he has to cry about it, go ahead. But then you still need to get back out there tomorrow. So, I mean, the emotional thing, I mean, is a conversation about it not being pent up, cool. But it doesn't change what society is asking of us, whether you're emotional about it or not. You still have to go deal with it. Telling a woman how you feel, hopefully she can build you up the way Ray now was talking about. And I think that's important to give you the fuel to deal with the world, but you still got to go deal with it, even after you wipe your tears.
That's solid. That's solid.
Absolutely.
Right. That's
Absolutely.
solid.
There you go.
Right.
Enjoyed you boys this evening. Enjoyed the conversation.
Definitely,
It's
man.
been a pleasure.
I want to throw one more thing out there because I see this other comment. We make enough money to choose our financial match. So here's something I didn't know about. I'll drop this and then we can wrap it up. But we always talk about, in terms of men being a financial support and they're the ones that cover the bills, et cetera, et cetera. Here's a little fun fact. There's it's part of Europe where actually women are the primary breadwinners of the household because there's not enough men to marry the women. So the women take on the role of the financial stability for the household. Just a little fun fact I wanted to throw out there.
That's interesting.
So in doing so, Omar, do the women also take on that masculine role? Because typically, hey, the person who pays the bills makes the rules, right? So how's that working out over there in Europe right now? How's that working out?
That I don't know. I just know that the women have to take care of the men because there's not enough, not enough to go around. So they usually, pay for the dinners and they usually pay the bills to cuff a man, right? So,
this is yeah,
but not to taking out the garbage or anything like that. They didn't go that deep, but more about the household expenses.
See. What you gonna say, Ray? What you gonna say?
No. I was just laughing at Omar basically.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
like this particular comment about we make enough money to choose our financial match. I disagree with that. I don't think you do. I honestly don't think you do. And I hate to be the guy to turn into, Kevin Samuels, but you don't. You don't. If you're a woman that's making $500,000 a year, you cannot choose whether or not you meet a guy that's making $1 million a year. You can't. You can hope to find that. You can position yourself where hopefully you attract that, but you don't choose that though, right? Because you don't know what they value and what they desire. So while you may desire that, you don't know what it is that they desire. You don't know what it is that they are looking for, what their qualities, what attributes they're looking for, what they value, right? And so, I think that we've gotten to a space where sometimes high earning women, we have a tendency to downplay that. And I actually think that that's something that is incredible. I know one of my good friends back in the day when we used to always talk about men in our general conversation, our little messages or whatever, we always talk about like, hey man, what number would you give her? Right? Like on some old Kevin Samuels type stuff, right? Oh man, so we would go face and we would go body. And a good friend of mine once said, oh no, there's another level, EP. And I was like, what's EP? He said earning potential.
Wow.
and so he helped me to understand that, oh snap, there is another element that even I wasn't considering. But see, this dude was evolved. He was developed to whereas he understood, yeah, that other stuff is important, but the value that this woman is going to bring to, my world and the world that we can build has value. Now, this dude was on some next level space age pimping, right? Like we was all living in 2010. He was clearly in like 2050. And so I appreciated his mindset, and he had his own, to be clear. Like this wasn't some dude that was sleeping on somebody's couch that was looking for a woman to pay his bills. Like, nah, he had his own, but he was assessing these things because what he recognized as a businessman was that everything has a cost, right? And so I did appreciate that his mind was evolved like that, but most men in this space are not evolved, right? And I'm not saying that means that women need to take a step back, but I'm saying that to say that the options that you have, or if your expectations is for a man to place the same amount of value on your earning potential as you see, that's not necessarily the case, right? And so I'm not saying that you can't have what you want, but I'm saying that to just feel like you can choose. No, you can choose who you don't want, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can obtain what you do want. You know what I'm saying? And I think that has to do with how we perceive or what we perceive as value. You know what I'm saying? And I do think that we will continue to grow where other people can understand the value of a woman that is a high earner, the value of a woman that's intelligent, right? But I also push that back on women to say, once a man understands and appreciates your value as a high earner or all these other things that you bring to the table, you have to honestly be willing to bring that to the table, right? You can't be this high earner, but still have the expectation that I'm gonna find a man that's gonna pay for 100%, right? And that's where when we get into these conversations about 50-50, everybody gets their feathers ruffled, but it's like you went through all of this pressure and all of this stress to earn high so that you can find a guy that pays for everything. Like if that's an asset, you're supposed to use your assets. So that's what always blows me, is that people that are high earners still have this expectation that I'm going to earn high, but I'm still going to expect to find a man that pays for everything. And anytime that this conversation gets broached, then all of a sudden we're ridiculed, like, oh, it's broke men, and it's that. No, it's not about being broke.
It's the Khloe. It's the Khloe.
And you're saying
Khloe Kardashian effect. It's the Khloe Kardashian effect, right? It's the Khloe Kardashian effect, right? She keeps going after the guys, the basketball players, instead of going into a Walmart, finding a guy that's like 6'7", 6'8", stocking shelves, and say, man, he's handsome. And as you said, earning potential, right? I'm going to put some money into this guy, and he's going to be the next big thing, right? But instead, you keep chasing the guys that have all the women chasing them, right? And it's just you're going to lose that battle every time, unless you one of the coldest to ever do it, right? But if you're not, you got to know how to use your resources to be happy.
You got to leverage. You have to leverage. You have to leverage what you have, right? So, Isaac, it's comments like the last one that you read that it's a very bold comment, right? You know, and I'm assuming, I could be wrong, but I'm assuming that was a young lady who felt very passionate about, you know, her financial standings, right? Like, oh, I make enough money to pick and choose who I want, right? But when I hear comments like that, I'm instantly triggered, right? Because now I'm saying that, I'm receiving that as masculine energy, right? Because when I think about a man, I'm thinking about a man taking care of a woman, right? Like, I believe that men take care of their women for the most part, right? The Bible tells us, not to get biblical here, but he who finds a wife finds a good thing. He who finds her, not her who finds him. So she's talking about she makes enough money to have who she wants. That's going to be her first mistake right there. She needs to sit back, fall back, play her part, and then allow this man to find her, seek and find her. And then that's where she's going to get what she truly desires, as opposed to, you know, landing all of her earning on her earning potentials or her financial status. To me, someone who has their own, that's not going to bowl well with me, right? And like Omar said, right, if you're looking for one of the coldest, you want to play your part, right? Play your part, right? That doesn't mean that you are subservient. It doesn't mean that you less than, but we all have a part to play. Play your part. Let me be the man who I am, who I was created to be, and you be the woman who you was created to be. And let's not cross those boundaries. Let's not cross those lines. That's what we're doing now. We're all over the place. Let's get back to, you know, let's find some balance here. Right, let's find some balance here. But it's statements like that young lady made that really triggers me. I ain't gonna sit here and lie to you. It really triggers me because that's some very masculine thing, right? Because
Ray,
men,
you literally
we're the providers. We are the providers. We take care of, you know, of our women, right? Like that's what we're supposed to do, man. Like
it only took Ray an hour 32 minutes to get to his emotions.
Hey, triggers, right? Triggers. So now I would say it's right. I don't know that young lady right there. This is not saying anything negative about her, but if I hear something like that from any young lady, that's a young lady that I'm going to run away from. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so that's interesting though, right? Like, and I guess I do get it. I definitely get it. And from your perspective, like you're saying, is it you feeling like when you hear something like that, that's something that you will run away from? Is it because in that moment you feel like I already know where this relationship is going to go, right? Like, or like what's going to be the foundation of how we interact? It's going to be a power struggle as opposed to us learning how to interact with one another.
Yeah, it's not going to be a power struggle because I'm going to be out. So I'm not going to even stick around. So it's not going to be a power struggle. But when I hear something like that, I'm thinking, okay, is this going to be worth it, right? Like, what am I going to have to do? What am I going to have to give? What am I going to have to sacrifice, compromise in order to be with a person who's bold enough or who believes this, right? Who feels this way? Hey, I make enough money to get who I want. Well, we know that's not true. No, you don't. No, you don't. You may make a good living and everything, but you don't make enough to get, to have any man that you want, right? So for me, I'm questioning right then and there, is it worth it? Do I want to even entertain this type of situation? And for me, for the most part, I just don't feel that's just something that
I don't know what got said that triggered the comment section, but like now they involved, right? Like somebody said, the other three are looking like the views and thoughts expressed or not. That's good. That is good.
Lord.
Says, I think you have a right to run. We are not yoked, but I'm yoked to someone that wants to build with me and not around me. That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's to each his own, right? I think whatever works for you, it works for you, right? Because I remember I met a couple many years ago, and I made the stay-at-home dad joke, but he was a stay-at-home dad. His wife was like an editor-in-chief of a magazine, so she made good money, and they wanted someone to be at home with the kids. So he had a couple sports cars. That was his thing. And he was happy. And then he was like, he loved it because on the weekends, he had to himself. And he can go out with his friends, hang out. So it's almost like he had the single life on the weekend where he can go and hang out with his boys and he had the cars and everything. And then during the week, he's with the kids, right? But also on the other end, one of my guys was dating or was trying to date this girl. And she asked him right off top how much disposable income he had for the year. And he was asking her what she meant by that. And she's like, well, you want to get serious about dating, you need to have at least $300,000 in disposable income for me to take care of myself, because that's what it costs to keep me looking like the Instagram model I am, right? And so this fool went home and crunched the numbers, and I think he came up around like 30K short. And he told her, hey, I'm like 30K short. And she's just like, yeah, that's not going to work. So when I say to each his own, right, like, because someone was giving her that, right? She understood what her value was in the marketplace. And like I said, to each his own. If it works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't, it doesn't, right? And then you move on. But at the end of the day, you need to be realistic too with yourself, right? And what your market value is at the end of the day in terms of managing your own expectations. So I'll just leave it there.
It's a good idea. You leave it there.
Listen. That's fair. That's very fair.
I'll leave it there.
Gentlemen,
I thought this was a safe space right here. No, go ahead.
Right. And look, you guys, I my goal wasn't to keep as much as I love y'all. Look, so what I'm gonna say is, I want to first and foremost, while I have you, and y'all can probably hear my son crying in the background, but while I have you all here, I want to first and foremost, man, thank you all profoundly. I cannot express enough how special having you guys on not only this platform, but just even having the opportunity to build with y'all. Like, I'm not bullshitting when I tell y'all this. Like, you all are three of the most important people in my world. You know what I'm saying? Like three best friends. And I got so many stories from you guys. I got so many stories that I could share about you guys. And like, even just the value that you add to me, you know what I'm saying? In terms of our relationships, individual relationships, and just, how we kind of key into one another, man. Like, you all are my tribe. I got an opportunity to have an online discussion and we talk about deep stuff on our one-on-ones, but, even inside of this emotional space, man, I got an opportunity to have a conversation that we might not characteristically have on a one-on-one basis. And I got an opportunity to have it online, which to me is wild. But the fact that not only each one of you all was like, yes, but showed up today. And we're talking about like 24-hour notice. There was something inside of me that knew that this would be special, and it means a lot to me. So I'm just sharing that. I'm openly expressing how much I value and love you guys, man, and just how much our relationship has impacted me, and how much of me is because of you all. All three of y'all are my brothers. I'm not even joking. This ain't a blood thing. Like, y'all are my brothers. And to have y'all up here, man, like, and having this conversation, that's not something that's characteristic. We could have been talking about sports. We could have been talking about the Drake Kendrick, battle or whatever. And we sitting here talking about some emotions, you know what I'm saying? But the fact that y'all showed up, bro, like, to me, this, beyond the content, the meaning behind it means so much to me. And so I just want to let y'all know, man, how much I appreciate y'all, how much I love y'all, and that this won't be the only time that I'm bringing one of y'all or y'all on, because y'all are the people that feed into me, and y'all are the type of people that I feel sometimes whose voice could add balance to the force, right? Because right now it's a bunch of lame cats. It's a bunch of, just people who don't have the kind of foundations and they don't do the work. And that's what I love about y'all. Y'all do the work, man. Like, every last one of y'all are ambitious. Y'all are working on y'all business. I'm not going to put y'all business out there, but y'all are doing major shit. And I appreciate that. But what I always appreciate about y'all is y'all continue to do the work. Y'all don't hang your hat and just be like, I'm perfect. Regardless of our big ages, we still are reading. We still are consuming information. We're still accepting feedback. We're still recognizing that we can grow. And that is why having you all on this discussion meant so much to me, because I feel, like I said in the onset, that you all, to me, are leaders amongst men. And a lot of times, and this is what people don't understand, a lot of times, what do they say? Those who can't teach, right? Because generally those who know, they too busy doing it. They too busy doing the work. They ain't got busy to sell you some training course or whatever, trying to hustle you. Y'all are the ones that's in the dirt, getting it done, grinding, building your empires. And so because you're in the game, you're right, y'all on some LeBron-ish, but because y'all in the game, y'all ain't got time to coach. Y'all ain't got time to give the play-by-plays and what y'all feel about other. Y'all are actively in the game. And so the fact that y'all took time out, that y'all called time out from the game to come and have a discussion with me, man, I cannot begin to explain, man, how much it means to me. So I just want to let y'all know, and I'm saying this publicly, how much I love y'all, how much I appreciate y'all, and how much value you add to my world. And so, like I said, man, gentlemen, thank you. And we will have you on again. I'm certain that even the people that are tuned in appreciate the value that you've added, man. But thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate
Thank you. Thank you. And know that's reciprocated as well. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate
Absolutely.
you.
So with that being said, I'm killing everybody. I'm removing them all so that I can go ahead and wrap up. and I wanted to do that publicly, man. And I'm not, that's not me just saying that because, they can, no, I'm dead ass when I say that those three gentlemen to me are literally why I am who I am. And so to hit them up short notice, on a day that's 88 degrees in Chicago and probably hella sexy in New York, I just love the fact that they were able to pull up and add value to a discussion that I even questioned at a point whether or not they would. Like, there was a point where I was like, I don't even know if they will add in to the discourse, because we don't, like, we talk about a lot. We talk about our thoughts. We don't always talk about our emotions. And so this was exactly what I could hope for, right? I will end with just kind of summing up and just giving my own personal opinion. I think that what was unique about this discussion is that I hesitated for a moment, right? Because we all recently saw the footage of what occurred with Diddy and Cassie, right? And so now there's obviously reasonably and understandably this public outcry where it's like, well, where are all the other people that are speaking out about this? And while I can understand why everybody doesn't speak out about it, you know, I was hesitant about having a discussion about men and their emotions in the aftermath of us recognizing of the tragic experiences that Cassie has had to experience, right? I question if I was being tone deaf, if I was centering the conversation around men when really I should be talking about her emotions, right? But I had already planned this discussion, and so I didn't want to deviate from that because I felt like it still had value. And I also even felt on some level like when we witnessed what we did, while it was tragic, while it was abhorrent, while it was inexcusable, what we also saw was someone who clearly does not have a handle on dealing with his emotions. And when men, not even just Black men, when men do not have an outlet or have an inability to express their emotions, and the only avenue that we're given is anger, then that becomes the avenue that we lean into, right? Because that's how we solve issues. When I show my vulnerability, I'm being castigated. When I show my sensitivity, when I show anxiety, I'm being castigated. But when I show anger, I get results. When I show my ass, I get results. That's why we've even seen Kanye, like every time Kanye has an outburst, and no matter how ridiculous it gets, all the way from George Bush doesn't like Black people to, you know, the slavery was a choice, right? What we're seeing is someone who does not know how to express emotion, but understands outrage and anger and triggers, delivers results, right? And so I don't want to be in this space where that's the only tool that we get an opportunity to use in our tool chest. Because if we're really talking about moving beyond it, if we're really talking about growing and evolving, what we're talking about is men, and because I'm a Black man, specifically Black men, learning how to articulate, how to first understand, but then also articulate and deal with their emotions, right? And so I wanted to have this conversation, and I didn't want to place the spotlight on women, make it seem like where we are is because of you, especially Black women. You all have been the foundation. You all have been the centerpiece of the Black community, as far as I'm concerned, for our existence forever, and especially since we've been in America. So the value that you have added cannot be quantified. I also believe that as men, we need to start getting comfortable with this new space as we redefine what masculinity is. And it's going to be a balance, right? It's going to be a balance, because a part of that balance is going to be us understanding that we do have a role. If you are a hetero male in this space, you do have a role, and you need to be able to add value in that space. But we also need to understand that that role isn't an indictment, right? That role isn't a prison. It doesn't mean that just because we are considered to be strong, or just because we have the ability sometimes to manage our emotions and still kind of push through, that means that we should not express our emotions, that we should not recognize our emotions, that we should not feel the type of comfort around our significant others where we can authentically have these interactions, right? And while that, I will put the onus on us, and I will say that that's on us to do that, I will say that we can only do that if we have your support in doing it, right? Meaning when we share this, that you allow us the moment to show our vulnerability, that moment to show our weakness, and it does not, I'm not going to even go as far as to say be weaponized against us, but just that we can give the release, and then when we step back up to the table, that's not being held against us mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, right? And I know that this isn't a switch that you can necessarily turn off if you're not someone that just naturally kind of lean in that area, but these are the kind of conversations that we need to have, because I think that as we lean more into this space, if every time that we do express our emotions, we're being reprimanded for it, then it's like Pavlov's dog, right? We're going to be like, oh, well, they told me they wanted me to express my emotions, but then when I did it, I got ridiculed. I'm not going to do that behavior anymore, right? And so we have to evolve collectively. This isn't an individual evolution. It's a collective evolution. But I will say this much, and this is how I was going to end it initially, because when I saw the weaponizing the vulnerability clip, I did write some notes. And one of the things that I wanted to be cognizant of was I didn't want us to get to a space where we felt like we're telling women to be better, right? Oh man, a woman's role is that you need to be a nurturer and you need to figure out to be a better nurturer. I get that, but because I'm a man and because of the way that I view things, I'm going to always put the onus back on men. And I'm going to say, hey, if you are with a woman and you recognize that she is not listening to your emotions, what made you think she was a nurturer from the jump, right? Now, it's one thing if she was a bait and switch. It's one thing if she acted like she was going to be someone that was really keyed into your emotional space. And then all of a sudden, the moment that you shared your emotions, she weaponized them against you. But it's another thing if you went after an Instagram baddie, you went after someone that when you saw what she was posting on social media, when you thought about all your interactions, she never shared with you that she was a nurturer. And then all of a sudden, when you got into your emotional space, now all of a sudden you're frustrated because of the fact that you feel like she's not holding up some mantle of what I think being a woman is supposed to be. All right. Well, did she give you any indications that that's who she was from jump? Right? Because to me, it's not fair. It's not fair for you to go after the Instagram baddie, but secretly what you desire was someone that could speak to your emotional well-being. So all I'm getting at is, you know how they say when a person shows you who they are, believe them. We also need to understand that the criteria that we are using to evaluate the type of women that we see value in, we have to understand that in those weak moments, you got to allow them to be who they are. You got to allow them to be who they are. If the only thing that you got on your list, right? Because we talk about how I value men, and, Kevin Samuels used to pull women up and ask, all right, how do you rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10? You can't say 7. If you're looking for a 9 baddie, but part of your criteria isn't that she's a nurturer, isn't that she is going to listen to you and that she's, down for you, that she's a ride or die, that she can cater to your emotional needs, then don't all of a sudden expect this woman that has shown you who she was all of a sudden cannot cater to your emotional needs. It's not fair as a man to then jump in comments and act like, oh, I'll never do this again. All black women are trash. Nah, because they're not. Maybe your selection process is trash. And I'm not the dude that's sitting here like, oh, I'm about to rake guys over the cold, because I don't know your personal experiences. But I know in my personal world, I've met a lot of incredible, amazing black women. I just have. But I think that's a part of who I am, because I'm an incredible, amazing black man. And the gentlemen that I had on this podcast are incredible, amazing black men. So if the only thing that you are attracting is trash, then there is a point where you have to ask yourself, what is it that I'm valuing? Am I valuing the type of woman that is actually going to hold me down and add value in these spaces? It's not fair for you to marry or get with a woman who has shown you who she is and then get mad when she is who she's shown you who she is. It just does not make sense, right? But I did think that this conversation will have value because of how we got nuanced. But I did want to make that message because I see the comments. I see the women that we are giving attention to, and the woman that made the comment in that particular, clip that I showed, this is an attractive woman, right? Is she someone that you would have naturally been attractive to, right? Because she was a slender woman, you know what I'm saying? Like, or was you looking for someone that had all the extra stuff, the BBLs? Because if that's what you're looking for, then I need you to understand that life is all about cause and effect, right? So if that is what you prioritize and you decide that that's where you draw the line, that that's what you're going to deal with. It's time for us to get off of this space. I'm not trying to victim blame, but we got to get off this space. We got to start learning how to accept accountability of the choices that we make. And this is on both sides, because women do the exact same thing, right? You know the things that you value. If it's not giving you results, they say insanity is making the same decision, or it, you know, is insanity is making the same decision and expecting different results, right? Like if you're not getting what it is that you're looking for, then you might need to change some ingredients in the recipe. So with that being said, man, I want to once again, man, just show a massive amount of love, man, to these gentlemen, man, that hopped on this podcast. Like, yo, like this means a lot to me, because like I said, y'all just have no idea how special they are to me, man. Like they really are my heart. They've been there. And when it comes to them, we all know where the bodies are buried, right? Like mutually. Like, so, you know, we were able to have this conversation. You know, I ain't outed none of the homies, but I still feel like it had value. And so I want to thank them. I want to thank you all. And with that being said, until the next time.